Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Hi, everyone. We're so glad you could join us today. We see that a lot of you are joining right now. We'll get started in just a moment, but before we do, uh, we'd really love to know where you're all joining us from. Go ahead and use the chat feature to say hello and share your location today. It's always very exciting for us to see how far and wide our community reaches. And while you're also doing that, here's a quick question as shown on the screen for all of you to think about as we kick things off. And that's what's one word that describes what it's like to be a leader today. So go ahead and drop your thoughts in the chat. We're going to revisit this later in the session. Yep, go ahead and participate there. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Juana Delgado from GP Strategies, and I'll be your host today. Today, we'll be talking with our very own Leah Clark, leadership practice here at GP, about what's holding leaders back and the mindset shift your organization can't afford to ignore. But for now, before we introduce her properly, let's first go over a few housekeeping items. So today's session is going to be recorded. In fact, it's already being recorded, and you'll get the link to that in your email within 24 hours. And also, even though you're all on mute, we definitely want this to be an interactive session. So please feel free to use the chat to share your thoughts or raise your hand or use the Q&A features if you can't access the chat. And then for questions, pop them in the Q&A section so we can answer them during the presentation or save them for the end. And all right, yes, thank you so much for participating in the chat. Go ahead, leave your location, your name. We're so excited that you're here. And let's get started. If you've joined us before, we're really glad to have you back. If this is your first session with us, a big welcome goes out to you. As I mentioned before, today's session is on what's holding leaders back, the mindset shift your organization cannot afford to ignore. And over the next 60 minutes, we'll all hear from Leah Clark here at GP Strategies on how leadership isn't just about skill sets anymore, it's all about mindsets. We just launched our newest report last week, Great Leaders Think Differently, the 4 mindsets shaping the future of work. And in this report, we reveal really what separates thriving leaders from those who struggle to adapt. So, drawing on insights from hundreds of leaders across industries, in this session, Leah is going to unpack these 4 mindsets, which are redefining leadership in a world shaped by disruption and AI and evolving workforce expectations. So, thanks again for being here. And now I'm going to introduce our presenter. Hello and welcome, Leah Clark, leadership practice lead here at GP Strategies. Thank you so much for being here. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the warm introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. Love the words that are popping up in the chat. I found demanding and exciting happening back to back in the chat. So what a great example of the polarity and the tension in being a leader. I love, someone said surfing on a monster wave. It wasn't just a wave, but a monster wave. So love what you're putting in there. Please go ahead and keep contributing if you're just joining. And we are going to get started. But I do want to just acknowledge for a moment that in the United States today, it is Veterans Day. And I wanted to just take a moment and thank all of those who have served in the armed forces for their dedication and their sacrifice. So thank you, and wanted to just spend a moment acknowledging that for those of us who are really honoring that day today in the US. So with that, let us go ahead and transition into the topic today, the mindset shifts that your organization can't afford to ignore. And before we do that, though, I want to just quickly do a pulse check. We started researching leadership mindsets several years ago, and the data that I'm going to go through today represents a bit of a revisiting of the concept of leadership mindsets. But For a while, we really jumped into the deep end of the pool around leadership skill development, we in the leadership space. And it wasn't until a few years ago that we started to realize that absolutely skill sets are important and mindsets play a pivotal role in formulating leader success. And I would say really success for anyone, individual contributors and leaders alike. But what about you? Maybe you're new to the topic of mindsets, or perhaps this is a particular focus area for you. When you think about leadership success, the mindsets, are they the secret ingredient? Do you think that they're nice to have, but not essential? Maybe you're still more of a skill set prioritization person. Do you think it's the foundation of the entire recipe, or you're still not sure? Where do you stand on leadership mindsets in particular? And I want to acknowledge that we need both skill sets and mindsets. But not everyone is in the same place with respect to how they think about skill sets and mindsets and how the two complement each other. So I'm just taking a look at the polling coming in here. I'll give it another couple of seconds before I'm impatient with my polls. So I usually like to ask Juana to end them a little on the early side so we can keep things going. So Juana, if you could please go ahead and share the poll results. And hopefully everyone can see them at this point. 50% of you say the secret ingredient, 41% say the whole recipe. I think it's really interesting that no one said nice to have, but not essential. So I think an acknowledgement, and perhaps no surprise if you're showing up on the session today, that mindsets in some way, shape, or form, we acknowledge really shape and inform leader success. So with that, let's go ahead and dig in, get my slides moving along here. As I mentioned, in 2019, GP Strategies really began its research into leadership mindsets, and that work has helped inform and evolve our approach to leadership development. At that time, we coalesced around 4 key mindsets. And as we took on the research for this year, we thought, well, do we change the mindset? Should we swap one out for another? And we really returned to the core 4, what I'll call the core 4 for a reason, because they continue to make sense. They resonate with leaders, with the organizations with whom we work. And those 4 mindsets are, well, first, let me define mindsets for you. What we mean by that. What we mean by a mindset, our definition is it's a particular way of thinking, and it's shaped by your attitudes and opinions. So for leaders, your mindset guides and informs the actions that you take. It's the lens through which you view the world, and it's very much based on your attitudes, your experience, your opinions. We found that these 4 mindsets were particularly important to leader success. And in a moment, I'm going to answer the question that may already be percolating around, is it only these 4? But when we started, we found that these core 4 were pivotal to leader success. First of all, a growth mindset. The work that Carol Dweck has done has been instrumental here, and many organizations have adopted and prioritized a growth mindset. That belief that our skills are not finite. We can learn and grow and get better, that challenges and setbacks are opportunities to continuously improve and to get better over time. In fact, when we have a growth mindset, we prioritize the effort even more so than the outcomes. And when we do that, the outcomes will come, will be there. With an inclusive mindset, we believe that contributions and performance are unleashed in an environment where we can hear from a wide range of voices and opinions, that we know that contributions are stronger, the results of organizations are stronger when we hear from all voices and include those voices in decisions and in the actions that the organization prioritizes. Now, agile mindset. This one I often say is the other side of the coin to growth mindset. So with an agile mindset, with the growth mindset, we fail and we try again, getting better with each time. With agile, we fail fast and we try again with some speed. This is where that resilience, that grit, that ability to pivot or bounce back comes in when we talk about having an agile mindset. Now, Agile mindset, we also look at this one as being comfortable taking a little bit of risk. Maybe you don't have all of the information that you want, but you have all the information that you need to move forward and make a decision or take an action. And finally, for those of you who know me, know that enterprise mindset is my favorite mindset. I often say I'm probably the only person on the planet who actually has a favorite mindset. For me, it's enterprise. It was the underdog of the mindsets when we did the research in 2019. In fact, more often than not, I found myself having to define what enterprise meant. What a difference just 6 years makes, because now in the research, but even more in the interviews that I conducted, enterprise mindset rose to the top of the list as a key priority for countless organizations that I've been chatting with and that I spoke with for this particular research. And with an enterprise mindset, we believe that the decisions we make and the actions that we take as a leader, of course, you want to be successful, you want your team to be successful, but when you make decisions for the benefit of the greater good, that is the ultimate goal. And it's hard to do that, but enterprise mindset top of mind. Now, I'd like to pause again. And now that I've defined those mindsets for you, even if you don't use these words, maybe you talk about a learning culture, perhaps you talk about creating a space where people feel as though they belong and they can contribute, or maybe you talk about that pivoting and that resilience, which speaks to Agile. You might not use these words, but as I've defined them and as you reflect on them, which of these would you say is a focus for your organization right now? If you had to prioritize, I'm keeping an eye on the chat as well in case somebody wants to pop in there, but I would love for you to weigh in with respect to these four. I got to tell you, I'm looking at the results. They're breaking my heart just a little bit. Oh, okay. Somebody, spoiler alert, somebody just weighed in on enterprise. And I'm not trying to lead you to click on that one, but I'm seeing the results come in here. We have about half of you participating, getting up a little bit to 65% now. And I think we will, okay, we're getting, everyone's chipping in here now. I'm still a little bit in pain, I have to tell you, with these results, but we'll share them in just a moment. And all right, Juana, if you could go ahead and share those results. You were maybe not surprised by what I said was my favorite and now the results to see that this group, and that's okay, not everyone is prioritizing the same thing. It looks as though 68% of you said growth mindset. I'm not surprised. I often refer to growth mindset as the big kahuna of the mindsets. It looks like agile, inclusive, and enterprise. So thank you for sharing. Again, all are important. I'm not here to tell you one over the other, but it's interesting that the results of those of you on the phone are a little bit different from what we are hearing from the clients with whom we've been speaking that focus on enterprise. Now, I want to recognize that I asked you to make a choice to pick one mindset. And I want to acknowledge that leadership in the world is hardly as simple as one particular mindset. And so I want to acknowledge that there are more than four, while suggesting that these four create a really strong foundation, a framework, if you will, or an umbrella structure to help give clarity and direction to the way that we want to encourage leaders to think and to shape their action. So a way to conceptualize or prioritize the way that they think and the decisions that they make. I also want to recognize, and this slide really brings that into focus, that oftentimes these mindsets work in tandem. So I might hear a client say, well, a growth mindset is super important. We want our people, our leaders, to learn and grow and get better as they come up against obstacles or challenges, and we need them to move at pace. We need them to learn and even fail at pace and try again, so that agile comes in there. So again, recognize that there are more than four mindsets. We have found that these are particularly important, and also want to acknowledge that often they work in tandem and complement each other. So enough background, let's start to get into the research. As I mentioned, we began this research in 2019, and then we did a bit of a reboot this year in 2025. And we wondered, is this the right time for us to revisit the mindsets? Would we see a difference or a change in the results? I mean, after all, it's not like much has happened in the past several years. only a pandemic, the rise of hybrid work, political tensions, global conflicts, economic uncertainty, and the explosion of AI. Certainly quite a bit. And while there's always been change and uncertainty, it's probably safe to say that the scope and scale and speed of what has been happening most undoubtedly would shape and change what we saw in the results. So we surveyed 500 leaders from across the globe with a particular focus in the US, UK, and APAC regions. And we asked some foundational questions for these mindsets. We asked, what do the best leaders do to demonstrate them? What gets in the way, and how will you know you are successful? And I want to unpack what we saw in the research. But I don't want to bore you with pie charts, or maybe I'll bore you with pie charts a little bit, but I also want to tell you a story that emerged in the results, the story that we saw about the leader through the information in the data that we collected. So we want to start that story with the answer to the question, what do the best leaders do to demonstrate these mindsets? And from a growth perspective, what the best leaders do to demonstrate a growth mindset, perhaps no surprise, it is the definition of a growth mindset. They focus on continuous improvement. In fact, 35% said that that is the action that a leader can do to best demonstrate a growth mindset. And with so many organizations focusing on a learning culture and getting better, it's perhaps no surprise that this is where the best leaders with a growth mindset are spending their time. Not resting on their laurels, but continuously trying to get better and to improve the organization, the team, and the work that they do. We heard that the leaders with an inclusive mindset, what the best leaders do is actively seek contributions and opinions from a wide range of individuals. And I love this. Inclusive actually was the first word that was put in the chat today when I asked you to describe leaders today. What's one word that describes them? So leaders with an inclusive mindset bring in those contributions from a wide range of individuals. And that is a smart area to focus on. Whether you are looking to encourage adoption of transformation or change, whether you're looking to get your organization on board with artificial intelligence, or simply looking to elevate the contributions in your organization and the success of your organization, bringing in a wide range of voices and perspectives is always a smart area to focus on. Now, from an Agile perspective, we heard that the best leaders who demonstrate an Agile mindset have a sense of adaptability and learning, right? That ability to pivot and change based on circumstances, and the ability to embrace change and innovation. So you can see that those numbers in the pie chart are relatively close together. And I think when you look at what leaders are prioritizing here, it is a bit of a nod to that uncertainty that I mentioned is happening in the world or has happened in the past few years. How many leaders have had to live through or lead through the pivot to dealing with a global pandemic and working from home, dealing with economic uncertainty, even on a daily basis as news comes out and then is maybe pulled back, and they need to grapple with that economic uncertainty with much more speed. AI, certainly the technology being murky and unclear and evolving at such a rapid clip that having an agile mindset is key. So certainly I think that we're seeing some of that reaction to the environment in where our leaders are prioritizing their agile activities. And then last but not least, with an enterprise mindset, 32% said that the best thing a leader can do is to align priorities and objectives with the organization's overall mission and strategy. That was also a focus at the top of the list for this mindset when we started the research back in 2019. So leaders are continuing to acknowledge that the best thing I can do is make sure that what my team is doing is connected to something bigger. It's a smart area for them to focus on, particularly when we know that connecting people to that larger objective and giving them a sense of purpose is a core way of preventing burnout. So a smart area for leaders to focus on. So here's the story of my leader, though. They're here, taking these actions that I just shared, focusing on continuous improvement, bouncing back, having that resilience, connecting to shared goals. And life is good. Life is good for my leader as they're standing at this side of our little scene here. But what's on the other side? What will it look like when leaders are successful in encouraging these mindsets? How will they know that they're successful? Well, as you know, we asked. We asked, what is on the other side? What will it look like when you are successful in encouraging these mindsets, exhibiting them in yourself, and encouraging them in the teams that you lead? Well, leaders said, I will know I'm successful in encouraging a growth mindset when new ideas and creative thinking are encouraged. 26% prioritized that. 25% said when they are learning from setbacks and failures. And I think particularly as AI becomes such a focus for organizations, keeping that growth mindset top of mind is imperative. I often talk about AI as a massive experiment in growth mindset, right? We try to use the technology. We start with a prompt and maybe it doesn't get us quite where we are expecting it to get us. And so what do? We typically don't abandon it. We say, well, let me try it again and try it with a different approach. And the technology itself is learning from those failures and getting better and stronger each time. So a growth mindset, multi-layered, I think, for the teams that we lead, encouraging it in themselves. And certainly, I think it's playing out a lot in terms of AI adoption. How do you know you're successful in demonstrating an inclusive mindset? When everyone feels a sense of belonging and psychological safety, and when there is healthy debate encouraged. I'm going to, again, point to AI as another key trend and a place where I think this idea of not even idea, this practice of creating space for belonging and psychological safety, debate, discussion is so pivotal. We want individuals using AI and we want them talking openly about it. Not a shadow workforce of AI users, but team members who are encouraged and feel confident that they can speak up about their concerns, their successes, and what it is that they're noticing. Now, this term psychological safety is on the tip of so many tongues, whether it is the head of HR or the leader of talent management or the leaders that I'm talking to. I've never seen, and Juana and I were talking about this just before we went live with our session. I can tell you I've never seen so much of a focus on psychological safety across so many clients and leaders as I'm doing right now. And I think part of that is because we're recognizing that as AI becomes a critical focus for so many organizations, having that sense of I can speak up, I can share what I'm noticing is incredibly critical. I will say that Amy Edmondson, who's done some great work in the area of psychological safety, she recently published an article where she talked about the fact that during times of stress and uncertainty, when resources are scarce and maybe leaders are hunkering down a little bit for the tough changes that they're experiencing, in those moments, what she said is psychological safety goes out the window. And so it's an important time to redouble our efforts on making sure that people feel that sense of psychological safety. She refers to it as a critical resource. And when it's not there, we do risk the chance that individuals are going to feel burnt out and be less likely to engage and participate in the way that we want them to in our organization. So psychological safety, I thought it was fascinating that we saw it at the top of the list of what leaders know they want to provide for others. It's going to show up in a different way when we tell the rest of the story of our leader. But let me keep going so we can tell that story. What does it look like on the other side when leaders are successful in encouraging an agile mindset? Well, 30% said team members are empowered. They act without waiting for permission or their leaders to make decisions. They are making that decision at the appropriate level. And I loved this with the focus on empowerment and accountability. Leaders are saying, as they did in 2019, I know I'm successful when I'm not the loudest voice in the room, when somebody else on my team feels comfortable making a decision, even when I'm not present, and knowing that they can do so with greater confidence. So 30% of leader said that this is the evidence that they need to know that an agile mindset has taken hold. And then last but not least, for an enterprise mindset, 26%. I will know I'm successful when there is a win as a team mentality and we're making decisions with that broader perspective in mind. So where does this leave our leader? Well, my worry is that while these actions are great, I'm not mad about what a leader is doing with respect to continuous improvement and resilience. But my worry is that it's only going to get our leaders so far. So you can see our little character moving along here. It's only going to get our leaders so far. And why do I say that? What is it that I am noticing? What is it that GP Strategies is noticing in the research? What we're noticing is what they're prioritizing less. That's one data point here. At the lower end of the prioritization spectrum for growth mindset, they're prioritizing less giving constructive feedback, fixing unfair barriers in practices and processes, taking risk, and fostering collaboration across departments. And what I think is that these less prioritized actions really collectively highlight less behaviorally proactive and challenging actions. Quite simply, the gnarlier, more difficult actions to take are the ones that are floating to the bottom of our leaders' prioritization list. And I think organizations need to place a greater emphasis on encouraging leaders to take those more courageous, inclusive, boundary crossing actions if they're going to really fully realize the potential of what they can accomplish. So yes, continuously learn, but maybe disrupt the status quo. Have inclusive conversations. Don't be afraid of healthy conflict. Focus on those shared goals, but maybe also be bold enough to share resources and put your individual goals aside for the benefit of the larger good. I think if we want explosive innovation, if we want clarity or curiosity around AI, if we want new ideas and innovation and transformation, that these actions are only going to get us so far. And I'd love to know from you, why do you think that that is the case? What do you think is holding leaders back from taking these bold actions? What's holding them back? As I start to tell you this story of our leader, and we see that perhaps they're not prioritizing the gnarlier, more difficult, bolder actions. Let's crowdsource for a minute. My perspective is one, and I certainly have the stage, but I often find that in these sessions, it's great to learn from each other and see, okay, so Jennifer is saying, and Jennifer shared to host and panelists. So Jennifer, I'm going to read yours out loud. Not feeling safe, not knowing how to take the bold actions. I love that. How about others? I know there's more on the call. What do you think? No right or wrong answer. Your perspective is valued and encouraged, and I would love to know. I'd love to learn from what you are noticing. They don't want to be held responsible if things go wrong. Yeah, okay, so Jeffrey is saying managers are overwhelmed. I think that's really fair, and they don't have that time to plan and implement. So maybe they're just taking the incremental steps that are right in front of them, or maybe they're going to their same go-to people, not stepping out on a limb because it's faster and easier. Yes, Stefan is saying lack of authority. There was something that Alan said, organization's not on the same page. And if the organization's not on the same page, maybe I am afraid to take that bold boundary crossing action. How about others? Hierarchy and tradition. I see that Matthew put that one in there. Yeah, we say be agile. We say, move forward in the absence of complete information. And then we have the hierarchy of you need to check with all of these people and you need to get all of these data points, right? And Julie is saying fear. So I'm going to share with you what I think is holding them back. And you've keyed in on that a little bit. It is what I am very warmly and affectionately referring to as the chasm of fear, right? There's this, in what we've seen in the data, they just can't jump over what I see as this chasm or this drop off that many of you have identified either by using the word fear or uncertainty or some sort of backlash that they might feel. This chasm of fear, I think, is holding them back. I don't just think it, I see it in the data from taking these bold boundary crossing actions. Now, it's a few things. It is scary out there for leaders, and there is a great deal of uncertainty. I heard this loud and clear in the interviews that I did and in some of what you're sharing. Actually, Catherine, it's almost like Catherine knew where I was going with this slide, because it is an uncertain backdrop for leaders. It's post-pandemic, trying to figure out what the world looks like. As I mentioned, the economic pressures, global conflicts, and then artificial intelligence, murky, moving quickly. I'm not sure what the boundaries are. Can I use it? Can my people use it? So there's these macro pressures that our leaders are feeling. And then what I also heard was there's a lot internally too, personal insecurities, an imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. The history and the experience. I have seen other leaders fail and try again. And guess what? It was a career limiting setback from them. They didn't praise the effort. They didn't say, you tried and you got better the next time. The organizational history is longer than I feel comfortable with. And I know you're telling me to have a growth mindset, but I'm recalling what happened, and perhaps that history is informing my reticence. And then what we heard when we asked about the obstacles was a great deal of this fear or tension underneath, a reticence to embrace the bold actions and fear-based obstacles holding them back. With growth mindset, fear of failure or making mistakes, and some of you put that in the chat. With an inclusive mindset, fear of saying the wrong thing. With an inclusive mindset, fear of failure or taking risks, which some of you mentioned in the chat as well. Even the resistance to established way of workings is sort of like fear of rocking the boat, or fear of people saying that you need to go and check all those boxes, and taking that intelligent risk is something that is a little bit scary for me. And last but not least, with enterprise mindset, a focus on individual or team success over shared outcomes. That is the obstacle, which for me, I see that as fear that I'm going to be evaluated as lacking or less than if I don't accomplish my own goals. Now, what leaders need to do is cross that chasm of fear. And we want to support them and uncover what it is that they need to lead themselves boldly into the future, right? A future that gives them confidence and competence to recognize the uncertainty of the world and the challenges and opportunities that are with them as they transform their organizations, embrace AI, and really help to advance the work that they do and their teams do. They have these obstacles: fear of failure, fear of making mistakes, taking risks, or of not reaching their personal goals. And it's this chasm that we want to help them over, a chasm that emerged in the data that we saw. So here is, I think, my last question for you. And then I'll share with you what I think we need to do to help leaders overcome this chasm of fear. Certainly, we have a perspective and a way that we support leaders, but what would you gift leaders? If you could give them one gift to confidently cross over this chasm of fear, what gift would you give them? What do you think they need to help them confidently cross over this chasm of fear? What's something you'd give them? Go ahead and, all right. Oh, I love EQ, Candace. That's a great one. Courage. Oh, the do-over. Gift of the do-over. I like that. That's like a very much a growth mindset perspective. Gift of the do-over. Maybe you didn't do it right the first time, but you can do it again. Certainty and clarity, courage. How about others? Candid and caring feedback. Love that. And we saw that feedback was something that was at the bottom of the list, and yet so critical for leaders and their team members to be successful. Still something that so many leaders across all levels shy away from, giving feedback. Independence to think and backing. Yeah, I love everything that you're saying. And agree with a lot of what you're saying. For your organization, it may look different. I do think that you've endorsed this, and I'll say that what we need to provide leaders with is a safety net. First and foremost, it's okay to take a risk and fail and learn, and you're not going to have a career limiting setback in that moment. The do-over, which you put in the chat, I love that. This idea that it is okay to take a risk and fail and learn. They need to feel confident in giving feedback and receiving it. Safety to engage in those contentious conversations, that healthy conflict, and emerge with their careers and their relationships intact. And to do that, they really need a culture that fosters that sense of psychological safety. They need it from their from their leaders, and they want to encourage it in the teams that they lead. I found it incredibly telling that leaders prioritized psychological safety as something that they knew would be evidence of an inclusive mindset for their people, success in an inclusive mindset, and yet they don't feel it themselves, right? I know I need to give this to my people, and yet I don't have a sense of psychological safety and trust, the ability to speak up and to take that intelligent risk. So our leaders are being held back by these fears. It's understandable that there are these outside pressures and this uncertainty that is a critical part of the world in which we live. And so providing psychological safety and building trust, I think that these are two essential elements to what our leaders need if they are going to take on those gnarlier boundary crossing actions that will really catapult organizations to transform in the way that many of them say that they want to. What does trust look like? Well, we have a particular perspective on trust. You can certainly look at it different ways. It's a very murky and nebulous term. So it's helpful to find a way to put some teeth behind it and say, okay, leader, when we talk about building trust, your people need trust in different ways from you. For some people, they want to see that you have the skills or the competence to get it done, and that's how you can demonstrate trust with them. For others, it's really about transparency. Do I feel like you are, or I trust you because you're telling me the whole truth? Or that you're authentic and transparent. You stand for something. I often say off script and on stage and off stage, that you're showing up as that same consistent, authentic person. You're trustful because you're reliable. You say you're going to get it done, and you do. You're going to get the resources for your people, or you show up reliably even in those micro moments, your one-on-ones, or a sense of selflessness that you care about me. So why do I put this up there? Because I never like to leave it and just say, oh, well, build trust. It sounds great, but if we don't give leaders a way of defining and clarifying what trust looks like, it can be really hard for them to work on it. So I like to give a little bit of a practical part. And then there was a gentleman, James Clark, I believe, Clarke, with an E at the end, while Amy Edmondson defined psychological safety. He really broke it down into these four categories. And I thought that this is a great way, I'm sorry, Timothy Clark, is a great way of making psychological safety a little bit more meaningful. It is about being accepted by the group as a starting point, but we know based on Edmondson's work that when individuals are in a group where they can challenge without fear of retribution, I'm not sure that that will work. I have some concerns about AI. I'm not feeling as though we're including the right people at the table in this decision. They can speak up and say that without fear of retribution. That challenger safety is when we've really gotten to a place where the presence of trust and psychological safety are there for the leaders. And based on what we're seeing in the results, they need it. They need it in order to take those gnarlier steps. And then last but not least, I think they need executive role models. And if I had any question about the validity or the need for executive role models, that question was squashed when just yesterday I was talking to an organization and they were adopting a new technology And one of the things, and we were talking about what does your organization need in order for this to be successful? And what they said was, we need our leaders, our executives, to be role modeling the use. If it is not clear that they are also doing what they're asking the rest of us to do, we don't feel confident and our teams don't feel confident that this is a priority or that they really mean what they say. So I think psychological safety, trust, and executive role models, in addition to a lot of what you put in the chat, incredibly important if we're going to provide that safety net to help them get over that chasm of fear. So this is the story and the metaphor that I wanted to use to bring the data to life. I hope that it resonated with you, and I think that it's important to take notice of what our leaders need as we're asking them to take these bolder actions. They need the support. They need the support to feel confident to do so. So last but not least, as we come into the last bit of the time that we have together, I wanted to just provide some thoughts on what it is that leaders can do for themselves and those they lead. So often it's important to me to take the concepts and bring it into some very clear actions that leaders can consider for themselves and for the teams that they lead. So I just want to wind it up here or round it up here with some things that leaders can do for themselves. And I would say as you scan this list, it really falls into some core themes. So what leaders can do for themselves is really, first of all, dial up that self-awareness. So much about a leader shifting their mindset is catching themselves when they notice that they are being anchored to a fixed mindset or they're not being inclusive. Am I reaching out to the same go-to people? Is the blame that I am placing on another department for why we can't get this done a fixed mindset? Am I, somehow playing it safe because I'm concerned that it's not going to reflect well on me if this isn't abundantly successful, when I know that the riskier choice might really be the way that I want to go? So self-awareness, catching yourself when you're being anchored to a particular mindset. Then taking that intentional disruptive action, disrupt the status quo, embody or embrace the mindset that you're trying to shift to. So three key themes across what's on the left-hand column: that self-awareness or checking yourself, number one. The number two, shifting your mindset. And then number three, taking the actions that are consistent with the change that you want to see. I'm going to cheat because I said three things, but I want to throw a fourth in, because when you take those actions that are consistent with the mindset shift that you want to make and you anchor those actions to something bigger, it tends to stick. Catch yourself, reframe your thinking, and then take the actions, particularly the ones that are connected to something bigger. They're more likely to be repeatable. And what I'm offering here is really just sort of fundamentally cognitive behavioral approach, right? Actions, feelings, and thinking. When you can really create that loop, then you're more likely to shift your mindset. Okay, what can you do for your team as a leader? A lot of this already came through in what I shared, but if you're looking for some practical things, how do you praise the process, not just the outcomes, not the accomplishments, but the process that you went through to win that deal or to partner successfully with another part of the organization? Somebody else in the chat here said feedback. I think it was Rudolph said, candid and caring feedback. I'm going to put a check mark next to that in the chat. Really seeing feedback as a mechanism to direct growth, and seeing feedback as being kind, not as being punishing or disparaging, but as a way to show that you care and that you want your people to get better. Things like hanging back and don't making a decision. Wait intentionally so that your team can step in, feel empowered, and feel accountable. So some of the things that leaders can do very practically and specifically, maybe it's not all of these that you do today, but as you are a leader and as you work with leaders, helping them to prioritize some of these actions will help to expedite those inclusive, innovative, boundary crossing, bolder actions that we want leaders to take if they are to realize what's on that other side. So final notes here as we wrap up. It is skill sets and mindsets. Clearly, this research is focusing on mindsets. I'm not here to tell you that they don't need the skill sets, but as many of you indicated right from the very beginning in our chat, mindsets are a critical ingredient to leader success. If you're only focusing on skill sets and neglecting what leaders need to do to make a mindset shift, I think you're missing out. And I think there's an opportunity to help leaders with both. We see inclusivity, agility, enterprise thinking, and growth mindset as critical. They're not the only mindsets, but they are the core four that we have found are particularly helpful and most critical in helping leaders frame their thinking and shape their actions. Leaders are feeling that uncertainty that I spoke about and that you put in the chat due to those macro pressures and those micro internal pressures that they're feeling from multiple areas. And they are prioritizing core behaviors that are going to bring them success. Again, I'm not mad about, as they say, the behaviors that they were prioritizing. And I think that our ability to encourage bolder actions really relies on creating that safety net, that culture of trust and safety, as some of you have put in the chat, that moment to breathe and to prioritize. And I think we owe that to our leaders. If so much of the success of organizations rest on their shoulders, particularly our frontline leaders, and we want to take those strong actions to support them. So with that, the research is available on the GP Strategies website. And if there are any questions, I'd love for you to put them in the chat and happy to discuss comments, questions, what you're thinking about what was shared today. Open to all of our participants. And I see that one came in through the Q&A. So we're getting a question about how you can really help the growth mindset take hold in organizations where the culture is not one that supports that fail and learn mentality. I think that this is the biggest challenge with the growth mindset. So I think it's a great question to ask. Often when I work with organizations who want to encourage continuous learning or a growth mindset, if you don't pair it with what I shared today, trust and psychological safety, it is rainbows and puppy dogs, as they say. It is really not going to take root. So you will be in an uphill battle to encourage a growth mindset if the culture isn't one that simultaneously works on trust and psychological safety. And again, some of the other things that I offered, focusing on the process, not just the outcomes, encouraging people to share the challenges that they've faced, praising, much like we do with our children, not just you got this awesome grade, but you worked really hard to study for that test or to get better at baseball or playing an instrument. Being able to afford that same kind of encouragement for our people is really critical. So growth mindset, focusing on trust and psych safety as the backdrop will create the foundation where a growth mindset can take root. So happy that someone asked that question. And if there are no other questions, Juana, that we're seeing, I'm going to just give it a moment to see if anyone wants to pop anything into the chat. Otherwise, I want to thank you for the time and for the participation. The full research report is available on our website, and we certainly look forward to seeing you at future GP Strategies webinars.
Perfect. Well, if nobody else has any more comments, questions, nothing else in the chat, then I just want to thank our presenter, Leah, for such a great discussion. And a big thank you to everyone for joining us, for your time, your attention today. As soon as we end the session, we do ask that you all take a minute to fill out our survey. Your feedback is really important to us for these kinds of sessions. And we hope that you'll join us again for another one of our upcoming webinars. You can visit the GP Strategies website and view all of our future sessions and see everything that's coming up here at GP Strategies. So thank you so much to everyone, and I wish you all a wonderful and productive rest of your day. Have a great day. Thank you.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.